My name is Susan Miller, and at 34 years old, I discovered that the woman I had let into my home out of compassion had stolen nearly everything we had. I didn't see it coming, not because I was naive, but because the betrayal came from inside the very family I had tried so hard to belong to. My husband's mother moved in with us for a few weeks, claiming hardship and loneliness. She left us nearly bankrupt. She didn't just take our money, she shattered something far more fragile. Before I dive into how a desperate act of generosity turned into financial and emotional ruin, tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever trusted someone who made you regret it, go ahead and like and subscribe so others know they're not alone. To understand why I let her in, you have to know where I came from. I wasn't someone who made emotional decisions lightly. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, in a family that believed in self-reliance, discipline, and modest living. My parents, both public school teachers, taught me how to budget, how to patch holes in socks, how to preserve leftovers until they barely resembled food. But more than anything, they taught me how to keep my promises. If you said yes, you meant yes. If you took someone in, they were under your roof, your rules, and your protection. I was raised to believe that family isn't just blood, it's what you do for each other when the storms come. I met Matthew Miller when I was 26, fresh off a promotion at the marketing firm where I'd been grinding since college. He was smart, charming in a quiet kind of way, and he laughed at my jokes in meetings, even when no one else did. We married after 2 years of dating, nothing flashy, just a warm ceremony with friends and my side of the family filling nearly every chair. His side was sparse. He was estranged from his father, and his mother, Evelyn, only showed up at the reception, stayed for an hour, then left without saying goodbye. I didn't think much of it. Some people are just awkward in crowds. Or so I told myself. Evelyn Miller wasn't cruel, not exactly. She had this way of making everything feel like a transaction cloaked in generosity. When she offered to help Matthew pick out his college apartment furniture, she forgot her wallet. When she came to our house for Thanksgiving, she brought a single bottle of wine with the price tag still on $3.49 from a discount bin, and then made a show of being offended when I said I had already cooked dinner. She wasn't warm, but she was lonely, and I always told Matthew that I'd rather be kind than right. "She's your mother," I'd say, again and again, as if that was a magic spell that justified the way she hovered around our life without ever really being part of it. Still, we managed. Matthew and I had built a quiet, organized life. We were savers. We didn't take vacations often, we drove used cars, and every month we moved money from checking to savings like clockwork. That nest egg represented more than just money, it was our plan. Our future home. Maybe a baby someday. Security. And then Evelyn's landlord sold the duplex she lived in. She called us in tears, saying she had nowhere to go. She was too proud for a shelter, too broke for another apartment, too unstable to stay with friends. I remember the exact moment I heard Matthew say the words, "Why don't you come stay with us for a bit, just until you figure things out?" I felt something inside me tighten, like the beginning of a cramp before it turns into something unbearable. She moved in 2 weeks later, with 4 oversized suitcases and a chipped kettle. Her presence filled the house in a way that wasn't physical. It was in the way she sighed when she entered a room, the way she rearranged the Tupperware cabinet because this setup just didn't make sense, the way she hovered over me when I cooked dinner and offered critiques that she couched as compliments. "You always go heavy on the garlic, don't you, Susan?" That's bold. When I'd retreat to our bedroom just for silence, she'd say to Matthew, loud enough for me to hear, "I hope I'm not intruding." I know how young wives like their space. At first, I tried. I included her in grocery lists. asked her if she wanted to go with me to the farmer's market, left chocolates on her pillow. I thought that if I just showed her love, she'd relax, she'd soften. I mistook frost for fear. But Evelyn wasn't anxious, she was calculating. Slowly, things began to shift. My coffee canister started running out faster than usual. Mail arrived opened. One day I caught her holding one of our bank statements in the kitchen. "Oh, I was just trying to organize things," she said, with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You've got such neat handwriting on your checks. Reminds me of my sister." I told Matthew, of course I did. He said she probably didn't mean anything by it, that maybe she was just curious. "She's never had real stability, Sue. She doesn't understand boundaries the way we do. Give her some time." I nodded, because that's what wives do sometimes when the man they love asks them to be patient. But my skin itched every time I heard a drawer open. I began keeping my laptop in our locked office, then locking the door behind me. I changed the passcode on our banking app. I didn't feel safe in my own home, but I told myself that made me the problem. I was too uptight, too controlling, too suspicious of someone who just needed help. The day the savings account dropped below /1,000, I was the one who saw the notification. A red flag from the bank, a warning of insufficient funds for an upcoming auto payment. At first I thought it was a glitch. I logged in, numb fingers typing slowly. It was all gone. Every last penny from the savings account, $42,317.12, had been drained in a series of online transfers and ATM withdrawals that neither Matthew nor I had authorized. I sat there, staring at the screen, my breath coming in shallow waves, as if I'd run up 6 flights of stairs. I opened the bedroom door and walked to the kitchen where Evelyn was sipping tea and watching daytime TV. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, the phone in my hand, the evidence burning a hole into whatever faith I had left in her. And that was just the beginning. I didn't confront her right away. That surprises some people when I tell them, but the truth is, when you're standing in the wreckage of something you thought was stable, your first instinct isn't always rage. Sometimes it's denial. I showed Matthew the transaction history that night, after Evelyn went to bed. We were sitting on the edge of our mattress, the bank app open on my phone between us like a silent witness to our failure. He kept scrolling, his thumb hesitating over each line. $600 from an ATM on the south side of town. $1, 200 wire transfer to a name we didn't recognize. $400 at a department store we hadn't shopped at in years. It wasn't just the money, it was the pattern. The precision of it. Someone had been siphoning our future out, one transaction at a time. "She wouldn't," he said softly, and I didn't answer. Not because I agreed, but because hearing him say it broke something I didn't want to name. I wanted him to get there on his own. Instead, he went to her the next morning, shoulders tight with a mix of fear and something else, hope, maybe, that she'd have some reasonable explanation. I watched from the hallway, unseen, as he asked her about the charges, about the withdrawals, about the missing money. She didn't cry. She didn't deny. She just looked at him, then at the floor, and said, "I had needs, Matthew. You wouldn't understand. Not until you've been where I've been." That was it. No apology. No remorse. Just that hollow, dismissive justification. Like she had taken out the trash instead of gutting our financial foundation. He stood there, stunned, and I stepped into the room because I couldn't take one more second of silence. "What needs?" I asked, my voice trembling but sharp. Because last I checked, vitamins and bingo nights don't cost $42,000. She didn't look at me. She picked up her teacup and sipped slowly. "Don't be dramatic, Susan. You act like I robbed a bank." "No," I said, Stepping closer, you robbed your son. That made her flinch. Barely. But it was enough to know she heard me. I could see the gears turning in her head, the way her mouth twitched before she found her footing again. You don't understand how hard it is to start over at my age, she muttered. I was in debt. I had medical bills. I didn't want to be a burden. Matthew sat down at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands. I stood over them both, watching the two people I cared about more than anyone else in the world unravel in completely different directions. One breaking apart under the weight of betrayal, the other fortifying herself with excuses and self-pity. That day, everything changed. We called the bank. Filed reports. They froze the remaining funds, though it was barely worth freezing. We spoke to someone in fraud investigations who told us, very gently, that unless we were willing to press charges, there wasn't much else they could do. Family cases are tricky, the woman on the phone had said. We see this more often than you'd think. I didn't sleep that night. I kept walking from room to room, touching the walls like they might offer answers. I opened drawers, pulled out receipts, pieced together the timeline of her betrayal like a forensic scientist desperate to prove something the world already knew. She'd been accessing our accounts for weeks, maybe months. Matthew admitted he'd once given her access to our internet for a Zoom appointment. He'd even used our shared tablet to help her navigate it. That must have been the moment. She remembered passwords. Watched us enter things. Took photos of logins when we weren't looking. The thought made my skin crawl. The following weekend, she left the house for a haircut. I took the opportunity to search her room, not to find money, but to find proof. Something tangible I could point to when the rage inside me boiled over into action. I found a notebook tucked under her mattress, filled with scribbles, phone numbers, bank routing details, and most damning of all, a to-do list. Call Visa, withdraw from Wells Fargo, transfer funds to self. She'd even written wait 3 days before next ATM pull in neat cursive, like she was teaching a class on how to bankrupt your children with grace. I showed Matthew. He stared at the notebook in my hands like it was a bomb about to go off. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. I want her gone, I said. The words came out steady, but I was shaking inside. I want her out of our house. And I want you to be the one to tell her. We argued about it. Of course we did. He wasn't defending her anymore, not really. But the idea of turning away the only parent he had left, it tore him in ways I couldn't fully understand. I told him it wasn't about family anymore. It was about respect, about safety, about not letting the woman who had violated our trust sit at our table and complain about the salt in the soup. That night, he told her she needed to find somewhere else to stay. I listened from the hallway as he said it, his voice cracking once, but he didn't waver. Evelyn didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat very still and asked, "So that's it? After everything I've been through?" Matthew didn't respond, and neither did I when she turned to me, eyes wide with a kind of bitter astonishment, like I'd set a trap for her and was now gloating. She packed her bags the next morning, though not all the way. She left little traces of herself around the house, like a ghost that refused to vanish. A half-empty lotion bottle in the bathroom. A silk scarf hanging on the back of the chair. A tube of lipstick in the laundry room, just waiting to be found like a booby trap for my peace of mind. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild us. I cut back our budget, canceled subscriptions, postponed our vacation plans indefinitely. I checked our accounts daily, then hourly, then compulsively. Trust, once fractured, doesn't just grow back. It has to be replanted, watered, and monitored like a fragile seed in uncertain soil. Matthew went quiet. He worked longer hours, avoided conversations. We weren't fighting, exactly. We were just drifting in the wake of something neither of us had words for. One evening, I found him sitting in the driveway, staring at the sky like it held answers. "She called today," he said without looking at me. "She wants to come by. Pick up a few things." I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, hands clenched around a watering can, the tomatoes in the garden shriveling behind me. "What did you say?" "I said I'd ask you." And just like that, the weight fell squarely onto my shoulders again. As if I was the one who had to choose whether to be merciful or just. Whether to reopen a door she had slammed shut with every withdrawal and lie. I went inside and closed the door behind me. Not because I didn't know my answer, but because I already did. She wasn't coming back in. Evelyn didn't take the hint. Or maybe she did, and simply didn't care. 3 days after Matthew told her no, she showed up anyway, standing at the edge of our front porch like she still belonged. She knocked once, then again, louder, until the sound echoed through the hallway where I stood, rooted to the spot. I didn't answer. I just stared through the peephole, watching her shift her weight from foot to foot, eyes narrowed like she was measuring how far she could push. Eventually, she turned and left, but not before sliding a folded note under the door, addressed not to Matthew, but to me. "Susan," it read, in her loopy, self-conscious handwriting. "I never wanted things to turn out like this. But I thought you, of all people, would understand what desperation feels like. Think it over." There was no apology, no remorse, just that thin layer of guilt dressed up as grace. And I saw through every word. Matthew found the note later that night, and his shoulders dropped the second he read it. "She's still trying," he said, folding the paper once, then twice, until it was the size of a coin. "But it's not your job to fix this." I knew that. Intellectually, I did. But there's something about being betrayed that makes you feel like you still owe the traitor something, closure, maybe. Or clarity. I didn't want either. I wanted silence. Space. Time to pick up the shards of a life I'd thought was solid and now barely recognized. And yet, even in her absence, Evelyn lingered like a shadow, turning every quiet moment into a question mark. That's when the calls started. They weren't from her, not directly. They came from numbers I didn't recognize, area codes from towns we'd never lived in, always around the same time, late afternoon, when I was usually alone. At first I ignored them, thinking they were spam. But on the third day, curiosity, or maybe something closer to dread, got the better of me. I picked up, and a woman's voice came through the line, clipped and professional. "Mrs. Miller? This is Diana from American Express Fraud Protection. We've been alerted to some unusual activity connected to your former household address. Can I confirm that you or your husband recently attempted to open a new line of credit?" My throat went dry. "No," I said. "Absolutely not." The woman paused. "We suspected as much. The application was flagged due to inconsistencies, but we recommend you monitor your credit closely. Identity theft can sometimes be an ongoing process." I hung up without responding, the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. It hadn't stopped. Whatever Evelyn had taken, it wasn't just our money. She had taken pieces of our identity, pieces she was still trying to wear like a borrowed coat. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, spreadsheet open, credit report pulled up, pen in hand. I made a list, every account to freeze, every password to change, every company to notify. I treated it like a job, because if I let the emotions get involved, I wouldn't be able to keep breathing. Matthew came in halfway through, saw the state of me, papers everywhere, my hair up in a haphazard knot, red pen circling numbers like I was solving a murder, and didn't say a word. He just sat down beside me, placed his hand on my knee, and stayed there until the adrenaline wore off. We decided to file a police report, though neither of us believed it would go far. The detective we spoke to was kind, measured, and unsurprised. "It's more common than you'd think," he said, not unkindly. "Adult children opening their doors to aging parents, then finding out too late that boundaries weren't respected. If there's documentation, we'll pursue it. But unless you press charges, it becomes a civil matter." And that was the question, wasn't it? Were we willing to press charges? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted her to sit in a courtroom and explain to a judge how she had rationalized gutting our accounts. I wanted her to feel the cold weight of accountability. But Matthew hesitated. "She's still my mom," he said, eyes heavy. "What if she ends up on the street?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew if the roles were reversed, if it had been my mother who did this, I might have said the same thing. And yet, that sympathy was the very thing she had counted on, wasn't it? Our decency, our compassion. She used them as leverage. And now, even our pain felt like part of her plan. Weeks passed. We changed everything we could: passwords, locks, our routines. I installed a security camera outside without telling Matthew, just in case. I checked it every morning like it was my new religion. I never saw her, but once, late at night, I caught the reflection of a car idling across the street. Headlights off. Engine humming. It didn't stay long, but I never stopped wondering. It wasn't until early spring that I finally learned what she had done with the money. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Marcy, an old coworker of Matthew's who used to live near Evelyn's old duplex. We made small talk for a while: how's work, how's the house, any vacation plans, before she casually mentioned, "Oh, and I saw your mother-in-law a few weeks ago." She was at the salon near the old neighborhood, talking about a condo she just bought. Said she finally got a fresh start. I blinked. "A condo?" Marcy nodded. "Yeah, in some new development off Hamilton Avenue. Must have cost a fortune. But good for her, right? Starting over like that." I don't remember what I said after that. I think I mumbled something about being happy for her. But I walked out of that store with shaking hands and a heart so tight in my chest I thought I might pass out. She hadn't spent the money on survival. She hadn't paid off debts or bought medicine or struggled to get by. She had used our savings to build her own version of freedom. A home. Stability. The very things she had dismantled in our lives, she had stolen to construct her own. I didn't tell Matthew right away. I waited 3 days, as if somehow the truth would soften over time. When I finally did, he didn't say much. He just nodded, slow and silent, and left the room. I heard him in the garage later, throwing something heavy into the bins, and for a moment, I almost followed. But I didn't. Some griefs are meant to be felt in private. That week, we got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a check for $500 and a note that simply read, "To help repair things." I wish I could give more. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because of the arrogance. The implication that $500 could heal what she'd broken. That we should be grateful for the crumbs after she'd feasted on our trust. I didn't deposit the check. I didn't tear it up either. I left it on the counter, where Matthew could see it every time he reached for the coffee maker. A reminder. Not of her, necessarily, but of who we were now. People who had learned the hard way that generosity without boundaries is just an invitation to be used. And yet, the real wound wasn't even the money. It was the silence between us, the way we orbited around each other without touching, like two planets caught in the gravity of a shared disaster. We were both still there, but we weren't together. Not really. And one night, that silence finally broke. It started with the dishes. A ridiculous, small thing, The kind of domestic nothing that couples fight about when they're too exhausted to fight about the real issues. I had just finished making dinner, nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and a side of vegetables, the kind of meal I could make half asleep. Matthew had been late coming home again, and when he walked through the door, he didn't say much beyond a tired "hey." He ate quickly, barely looking up, then pushed back his chair and stood. I thought he was going to thank me or maybe offer to help clean up. Instead, he walked straight to the couch and turned on the TV. I stood in the kitchen, hands in soapy water, and watched him pretend I wasn't there. Something inside me snapped, not all at once, not like a branch breaking, but like fabric tearing slowly until it couldn't hold its shape anymore. I dried my hands, walked into the living room, and turned off the television. He blinked up at me, confused, and I asked calmly, "Do you think this is just going to fix itself?" He stared at me like I was speaking another language. "What are you talking about?" "This," I said, gesturing around us. "Us. The way we're just surviving. You come home, you barely talk, we don't touch, we don't even argue. We just exist in the same house like roommates. I can't live like this." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes suddenly wet but hard. "You think this is easy for me? You think I'm not angry too? That woman ruined everything I thought I knew about my own family, Susan." I sat down across from him, the coffee table between us like a border. "Then say that. Feel it. Stop burying it in silence." His shoulders slumped. "I don't know how. I spent my whole life making excuses for her. It's like, if I admit what she did, then I have to admit that everything before this was a lie. That she never really loved me the way a mother should. That broke something in me. Not out of spite, but because I understood. Deeply. That need to protect the image of someone you love, even when that image is built on sand." I reached for his hand, and this time he let me hold it. We sat like that for a long while, the flicker of the microwave clock ticking off minutes behind us. We agreed to try therapy, even if it felt like one more thing we couldn't afford. I found a couples counselor through my insurance at work, and we started going every Wednesday night. At first, we barely said anything in the sessions, but over time, the words came slowly, like trickles of water from a long dry well. We talked about trust, about guilt, about how betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes your sense of what's real. And we talked about Evelyn, because how could we not? "I don't want to become like her," Matthew said one night, after a particularly raw session. "Someone who takes and never gives. Someone who manipulates people's compassion just to fill their own emptiness." "You're not her," I said. "You've never been her." But I let her in. I handed her the keys. "And you paid the price too." He didn't say it like he was asking for forgiveness. He said it like someone admitting to a wound that couldn't be seen. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself feel fully before. He was a victim too. Not just of the theft, but of a lifetime spent earning love that was always conditional, always transactional. And that theft went deeper than the numbers in our bank account. We started to recover in small ways. We went for walks again, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about nothing important, just neighbors' gardens or what to make for dinner. I started painting again on weekends, something I hadn't done since college. Matthew spent a few weekends fixing the fence in the backyard, even though we didn't really need it. It was like we were both trying to rebuild something physical to match the repairs we were making inside. Then, one afternoon in late May, a letter arrived in a cream-colored envelope, handwritten but unfamiliar. No return address. I opened it and immediately felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't from Evelyn this time. It was from a lawyer. Inside was a short, formal notice informing us that Evelyn was requesting a legal mediation over funds exchanged during cohabitation. She was claiming we had agreed to support her indefinitely and that she had contributed to the household in non-monetary ways that entitled her to compensation. It was absurd. Laughable if it hadn't felt so vile. She was suing us. Matthew read the letter twice, then sat down on the stairs like he'd been shot. "She's suing us," he whispered. "She's really doing it." We called a lawyer. My uncle had one he trusted from his divorce and explained everything. We gave him copies of the bank records, the notebook, the police report. He was calm, professional, but also blunt. "This won't go anywhere," he said, "but it's going to hurt. It's going to cost you time and money and peace of mind. She doesn't want justice. She wants leverage. Don't give it to her." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how someone could cause so much destruction and still believe they were owed something. I thought about the way she used to smile at Matthew like he was her whole world, and how that same woman had now put his name in a legal document demanding restitution. I thought about what it meant to protect yourself, not just with locks and passwords, but with boundaries so strong they couldn't be manipulated or reasoned with. The next day, I told Matthew something I hadn't said aloud yet. "We have to go all the way with this. Not because of the money, but because if we don't stop her now, she'll never stop. She'll find another way. Another crack in the wall." He nodded. There was no hesitation anymore. We were in this together. We filed our counter-response. Our lawyer made it clear that we would not be settling, that we intended to pursue a civil claim for theft if her suit wasn't withdrawn. He called it bluffing with teeth. And it worked. 2 weeks later, the case was dropped. No explanation. No apology. Just another silence in a string of silences that had defined our relationship with her. But the damage had been done. Even as we began to put our lives back together, a part of me remained raw. Not angry, exactly. Just wary. I no longer believed that family always deserved a second chance. Sometimes, the first chance is more than they've earned. Sometimes, forgiveness is an ode. And sometimes, love looks like walking away and not looking back. And yet, just when I thought it was finally over, she showed up one last time. It was the 4th of July. Not symbolic on purpose, just cruelly ironic. We had decided to host a small cookout in our backyard for the first time since everything fell apart. Just a few friends, some neighbors, nothing fancy. Burgers, cold drinks, and the kind of easy laughter I hadn't heard in months. Matthew had finally started smiling again, even if just in pieces, and I felt, for the first time since Evelyn left, like we were normal. Not healed, not over it, but able to carry the weight without it dragging us under. And then she walked through the gate. I didn't see her at first. I was at the grill, tongs in one hand, flipping corn on the cob and nodding politely at a story our friend Nora was telling. The sound of the gate latch clicking didn't register right away, not until the conversation around me shifted, a hush falling over the patio like fog. I turned and there she was, standing in the middle of our yard in an off-white dress, sunglasses perched on her head like she belonged in a magazine shoot rather than at the house she'd once nearly destroyed. Her hair was styled, her nails freshly painted. She was holding a pie. My first instinct was that I was hallucinating, that the stress of the past few months had finally frayed my mind. But Matthew saw her too. He froze mid-sentence, the beer bottle in his hand suspended in the air. For a long second, no one moved. "Hello," Evelyn said, smiling as if this were a holiday invitation and not an ambush. "I hope I'm not interrupting." I walked toward her without saying a word, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my wrists. Matthew was right behind me. I stopped a few feet from her, arms crossed, jaw clenched tight enough to hurt. She held out the pie like it was a peace offering, like baked goods could erase months of deceit, of betrayal, of legal threats and sleepless nights. "I made lemon meringue," she said, still smiling. "Your favorite, Susan." It took everything in me not to laugh. Or scream. Or cry. "You can't be here," I said, voice low and steady. "You need to leave." Evelyn blinked, then tilted her head slightly, like a teacher disappointed in her student. "Is that really necessary? It's a holiday. I just thought we could talk." "We're not talking," Matthew said, stepping forward now, his voice sharper than I'd heard in weeks. "You don't just show up after what you did." Her smile faltered for a moment. She looked at him then, and for the first time, I saw something real flicker in her eyes, not sorrow, but indignation. "I'm still your mother, Matthew." "No," he said. "You're not." The silence after that was suffocating. Behind us, I could feel the weight of our guests trying to pretend they weren't watching, pretending they weren't witnessing a family cleave itself in half. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, and she set the pie down on the patio table without permission. "You're making a mistake," she said, quieter now. "One day, you'll see that." I didn't wait for her to finish. I walked to the gate, opened it wide, and stood there until she took the hint. She didn't look back when she left. That would have required acknowledgement. She just walked, head high, steps measured, the same way she had moved through our house when she still lived there, like everything belonged to her. Matthew and I didn't say anything for the rest of the afternoon. We let the party dissolve naturally, people making polite excuses, plates left half full. Once everyone was gone, I sat on the porch steps and stared at the untouched pie, wondering if this was what closure looked like. A meringue crown on a poisoned history. Later that evening, as the fireworks started downtown, Matthew sat beside me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know she'd do that. I didn't even think she knew where we still lived." "She's never stopped watching," I replied, not bitterly, but plainly. "People like her don't need maps. They follow the scent of unfinished things." He nodded, and we watched the sky split open in bursts of red and blue. For the first time in months, he reached for my hand and didn't let go. "I think I finally believe you," he said. "About her. About all of it." It wasn't an apology. It was something better. It was belief. We got a restraining order the next morning. It wasn't about fear, not exactly. It was about declaring something out loud that we had whispered for too long. This is over. There will be no more second chances, no more letters, no more pie on the patio from a woman who only knows how to take. But damage like that doesn't fade just because the thread is gone. It lingers. It shows up in small ways, the way I still lock every drawer, the way Matthew hesitates before clicking on unknown numbers, the way we double-check every transaction like we're waiting for a ghost to steal from us again. And yet, even in the wreckage, we found a kind of peace. A peace built not on forgetting, but on knowing, on no longer having to pretend. We rebuilt everything, our budget, our trust, our routines. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't clean. Some days were still hard. But there were more good ones than bad. And that, we learned, was its own kind of victory. But I didn't expect what came next. Because just when I thought Evelyn had finally vanished for good, she made one final move I never saw coming. The letter arrived 6 months later, postmarked from Arizona. Not handwritten this time, but typed neat, emotionless font on plain white paper, like something from a printer in a rented office. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even an apology. It was a declaration. Evelyn was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. No treatments left. No time. And she wanted to see Matthew one last time. Not to make peace, not to admit anything, not even to return what she had taken. She wanted a visit. A proper goodbye, she wrote, like families do. She mentioned a hospice facility, a private room, and a nurse named Dana who would be expecting him. The letter closed with a single line: "He deserves the truth, even if it comes too late." When Matthew read it, he said nothing for a long time. He sat at the edge of our bed, the pages resting on his knees like lead. I watched his face shift between disbelief and something deeper, grief, maybe, or a strange, hollow kind of anger. "She waited until she had nothing left," he said, quietly. That's when she chose to tell me. I didn't offer an opinion. I didn't try to steer him. I had done enough of that. This had to be his choice. "Do you want to go?" I asked. He looked at me, then down at the floor. "I don't know. I don't know what's right anymore." I nodded, even though I did know. Not right in the moral sense, but right for us, for him. There were no perfect answers when it came to people like Evelyn. There was only the question of what you could live with. He booked the flight 2 days later. One night, no bags, just his wallet and a copy of the hospice address. I dropped him off at the airport and kissed him goodbye, not like a woman worried about infidelity or abandonment, but like a wife who knew she was sending her husband into the mouth of something ancient and unfinished. He called me from the hotel that night, said the place was clean and the staff kind. Said Evelyn looked different, smaller, almost childlike. Her hair had thinned, her skin pale and translucent like paper soaked in tea. She smiled when I walked in, he said, like nothing had happened, like we were just catching up. I asked him if he stayed long. He didn't answer for a while. She told me stories, he said finally, about her own mother, about the man who left her. She said she never learned how to love people in the way they needed, only how to survive. She kept saying that. I survived. I survived. Like it was some holy thing. And do you believe her? I asked. I believe she thinks it's true, he said. But I also think she could have chosen better. And she didn't. He came home the next morning. He was quiet for a day or two, but he wasn't broken. If anything, he seemed lighter. Like finally confronting the ghost of who she was had lifted something off his chest. A week later, we got another letter. This one wasn't from her. It was from the lawyer handling her estate. Evelyn had died 3 days after his visit. She left Matthew the condo. It was small, 1 bedroom, paid in full with the money she had siphoned from our savings account. The letter said she had no other assets, no debts, no insurance. Just that condo, gleaming and hollow, like the apology she never gave. We sat at the kitchen table, the document between us, and for the first time in a long time, we laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how perfectly on brand it was. Of course, she'd leave him the one thing she'd built with everything she stole. One last twist of the knife. What do we do with it? I asked. Matthew stared out the window for a long time, then said, "We sell it. We give the money to something good. Something she never would have approved of." So we did. We sold it to a young couple who were just starting out. Newly married, starry-eyed. The closing process took weeks, but when it was over, we made the donation together to a foundation that supported financial literacy for women leaving abusive relationships. A fitting irony, I thought. And the final closure we hadn't even known we were waiting for. We never spoke to anyone from Evelyn's life again. No cousins, no old friends, no one came looking. She had burned every bridge on her way out, and somehow we were the only ones left with ashes. But we weren't destroyed. Not anymore. The house was quieter now. Safer. The drawers stayed closed, the accounts untouched. I stopped flinching every time a bill came in. We began dreaming again, small things at first. A weekend trip. A new mattress. And eventually, bigger things. A baby. We weren't perfect, but we were honest. And we were free. Some wounds don't close neatly. They leave marks, raised edges, reminders of what was lost. But those marks, they also prove we survived. And not just survived, but grew back stronger. So, if you've ever trusted someone who turned your kindness into a weapon, I see you. If your heartbreak came from inside your own family, you're not alone. And if this story spoke to you in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for listening to my story.